She broke up with me on a Tuesday night, looked me straight in the eyes, and said she didn't love me anymore. Then 2 days later, when we went out with her friends, she slid her hand onto my thigh under the table, smiled at them like nothing had changed, and whispered, "Don't make this weird." That was the moment I realized something important. She didn't want me as a boyfriend anymore, but she still wanted all the boyfriend benefits. I'm a 32-year-old guy. I work a stable job in IT, normal hours, decent pay. Nothing flashy, but reliable. I've always been the planner type. I pay my bills on time, I track expenses, I don't like chaos. We were together for a little over 3 years. We moved in together after about a year and a half. The apartment is technically in my name because my credit score was better, but at the time, that felt irrelevant. We split some costs, but not all of them evenly. I paid the rent and utilities. She covered groceries most of the time, which in reality meant whenever she felt like it. I didn't mind, at least not back then. I handled the internet, the streaming services, the car insurance. I drove when we went out. I fixed things around the apartment. I scheduled appointments. I reminded her about deadlines. If something stressful came up, it somehow became my job to absorb it. She used to joke about it. "You're just better at adult stuff," she'd say. I took that as a compliment. Our relationship wasn't explosive or dramatic. No constant fighting, no cheating that I know of. It just faded. Or at least, that's how she framed it. When she ended things, she said all the familiar lines. "You didn't do anything wrong. I just need space. I still care about you." Then came the part that didn't sit right. She said she didn't want to move out right away. Rent was expensive. Finding a new place would take time. She suggested we coexist for a while, just until she figured things out. At first, I said okay. I told myself I was being mature, logical, compassionate. But almost immediately, I noticed something strange. Nothing actually changed, except the label. She stopped calling me her boyfriend, but she still expected rides, still expected dinner to be ready when she worked late, still used my Netflix, my Spotify, my car, still got annoyed if I didn't text back fast enough, still got jealous if another woman talked to me when we were out. And yes, she still used physical closeness when it suited her. Not sex exactly, that stopped. But the touching didn't, the casual arm around me in public, the leaning in, the flirting when her friends were watching, the way she'd make sure everyone knew I was hers, even though, according to her, we were very much not together. When we went out with her friends, it was the worst. They loved me, or at least that's how it looked. They'd joke with me, touch my arm, compliment me, say things like, "If you two ever break up, call me." She'd laugh. Sometimes she'd pull me closer. Sometimes she'd squeeze my leg under the table, just enough to remind me what I was supposedly missing. Then we'd get home, and the wall would go back up. No affection, no intimacy, just expectations. That's when it clicked for me. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her infrastructure. I was a stable platform she could stand on while she emotionally checked out and planned her next move. I was the safety net, the comfort, the financial buffer, the social proof. And the more I thought about it, the calmer I became. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel heartbroken in the dramatic sense. I felt clear. If we were going to be roommates, then we were going to be roommates. Not exes pretending, not half couple, half strangers, just roommates. And roommates don't get boyfriend benefits. So I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining my feelings. I stopped trying to win her back. Instead, I started changing the system. It happened on a Tuesday night, which already felt symbolic in a way I didn't fully understand at the time. Not dramatic enough to be a weekend, not important enough to be planned. Just a normal weekday, after dinner, while we were both still half in work mode. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling on her phone. I was at the kitchen counter, rinsing a plate. No tension, no raised voices. No warning signs that night, at least none that stood out. She said my name in that careful tone people use when they've already rehearsed what they're about to say. "Can we talk for a second?" I turned around and leaned against the counter. I didn't sit down. That detail matters, because part of me already knew this wasn't going to be a long conversation. It was going to be a decision that had already been made. She took a breath and said it. "I don't think I'm in love with you anymore." No crying, no shaking voice, just a statement, clean, almost professional. I nodded once, not because I agreed, but because I was processing. I remember noticing small, irrelevant details instead, the way the TV light flickered against the wall, the hum of the fridge, the fact that she didn't put her phone down. I asked, "How long have you felt like this?" She shrugged. "A while. I've been trying to figure it out." That was the first incongruence I registered. If you've been trying to figure it out for a while, you don't usually say it like a conclusion. You say it like a question. But this wasn't a question. This was a press release. I didn't argue. I didn't tell her everything I'd done for us. I didn't list sacrifices. I didn't raise my voice. I just asked another practical question. Are you saying you want to break up? Yes, she said, almost relieved that I used the word first. There it was, clear enough. I took a moment before speaking again, not for dramatic effect, but because I was checking my own reaction. My chest felt tight, but my head was clear. I wasn't in panic mode. I wasn't bargaining. Okay, I said. So what happens now? That's when the conversation shifted, and that's when the logic really started to fall apart. She leaned back into the couch, crossed her legs, and said, "Well, I don't think we need to rush anything." I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? She started explaining, slowly, like she was trying to make something sound reasonable by saying it gently. I mean, it's not like we hate each other. We live together. Rent is expensive. It would be stupid to just blow everything up right away. I nodded again, still listening. I think we can just coexist for a while, like roommates, until we figure things out. There it was, the sentence that would replay in my head later. Like roommates, I asked, are you planning on moving out? She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Not right now, she said. I don't have anything lined up. And honestly, I need time. I don't want to make emotional decisions. That sounded reasonable on the surface. I'm not an impulsive person either. I understand logistics. I understand timing. So I kept it practical. Okay, I said, so we break up, but we keep living together for how long? She shrugged again. I don't know, a few months maybe, until I'm stable. Another incongruence. She was already stable. She had a job, she had friends. She had family she talked to regularly. What she didn't have was the apartment in her name, the utilities in her name, or the financial buffer I provided by default. I didn't say that out loud. I just noted it. I asked, what about expenses? She looked at me like the question surprised her. What about them? Well, I said calmly, rent, utilities, food. If we're not together anymore, we should probably talk about how that works. She waved her hand dismissively. We can keep doing what we're doing. I don't see why that has to change right now. That was the moment something clicked internally. She had just ended the relationship, but in her mind, the system was supposed to stay the same. Same apartment, same routines, same safety, same benefits. Just without the emotional obligation on her side. I didn't react emotionally. I didn't say, that's not fair. I didn't say, you can't have it both ways. Instead, I asked another boring, practical question. So we're broken up, I said, but we still act the same? She frowned slightly. Not the same, just normal. Define normal, I said. She sighed, clearly annoyed now. Why are you making this so complicated? I almost laughed at that, but I didn't. I just looked at her and realized something important. She hadn't thought this through, or rather, she had thought it through from her perspective only. In her version, the hardest part, housing, bills, daily structure, stayed untouched. The only thing she was removing was me as a romantic priority. I said, I'm not making it complicated. I'm just trying to understand the rules. That word rules changed the energy in the room. I don't want rules, she said. I don't want this to feel transactional. I nodded slowly. Then what do you want it to feel like? She paused. I don't know. Easy? Easy for who? I didn't ask. I didn't need to. There was another silence, not awkward, just heavy. The kind where both people realize they're not aligned anymore, but one of them is trying to soften the reality. She finally said, I still care about you. I just don't want the pressure of a relationship. That sentence told me everything. She wanted the benefits without the responsibility, the comfort without the commitment, the stability without the label. And again, I didn't argue. I said, okay, if that's how you feel, then I respect that. Her shoulders visibly relaxed. I think she expected resistance. Tears, anger, negotiation. Instead, she got calm acceptance. But then I added, if we're not in a relationship anymore, then we're not in a relationship anymore. She looked confused. What does that mean? It means, I said evenly, that we need to treat this like what it is, a shared living arrangement, not a relationship. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. I could tell she was trying to figure out what I was implying. So, you're saying you want me to move out? She asked. No, I said. I'm saying we need clarity. I explained it in the simplest terms possible. We break up. That's your decision. I'm not fighting it. But breaking up changes things. It has to. She crossed her arms, defensive now. I told you, I just need time. I get that, I said, and I'm not kicking you out tomorrow, but we can't pretend nothing changed. She didn't like that answer. So, what are you suggesting? She asked. I thought about it for a moment. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to phrase it correctly. I'm suggesting that if we're roommates, I said, then we act like roommates. We split expenses. We split responsibilities. We respect each other's space. Her face tightened. That feels extreme. I looked at her, genuinely puzzled. Why? Because we were together for 3 years, she said. You don't just turn that off. That was ironic, coming from the person who had just done exactly that. I didn't say it. I just replied, you already did. I'm just adjusting to the new reality. She stood up from the couch and started pacing slightly, like she needed movement to burn off frustration. I think you're being cold, she said. I nodded. I'm being consistent. There's a difference. She accused me of punishing her, of trying to make her feel bad for leaving, of being petty. I didn't raise my voice once. I said, I'm not punishing you. I'm responding to your decision. That's when the conversation ended, not with a dramatic slam or tears, but with unresolved tension hanging in the air. She went into the bedroom and closed the door, not slammed it, just closed it. I stayed in the kitchen for a while thinking. That was the moment I made a quiet decision. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to negotiate affection. I wasn't going to fund a lifestyle I was no longer part of. If she wanted to stay, fine. But the rules were going to change. And in my head, I said it clearly, like a conclusion at the end of a meeting. Okay, then we're roommates. And roommates have rules. The breakup itself wasn't the hardest part. What made it difficult was everything that came after, specifically how little actually changed on her end and how much was still expected from mine. Within 24 hours, I realized she had mentally separated emotion from logistics. The relationship was over, but the lifestyle wasn't supposed to be. It started small, almost subtle. The morning after the breakup, I made coffee like I always did, 2 cups, automatically, muscle memory. She took one without saying thank you, sat at the table, and started talking about her day like nothing had happened. At first, I didn't say anything. I was observing. Later that day, she texted me while I was at work. Can you grab groceries on your way home? No emoji, no softness, just an expectation. I replied, what groceries? She sent a list, the same kind of list she'd always sent, brand specific, snacks she liked, things I didn't even eat. I stared at my phone for a moment and felt something shift. Before, those lists were part of a shared life. Now they were just demands. When I got home, there were no groceries on the counter, no sign she'd even considered going herself. She looked up from the couch and said, did you forget? I said, no, I just didn't go. She blinked. Why not? Because we broke up, I said calmly. I figured we'd handle our own food. She rolled her eyes. Wow, seriously? That was the first micro-humiliation. Not an argument, not yelling, just dismissal. The next one came the following evening. We were watching TV, my TV, on my Netflix account, and she casually said, hey, can you pause it and throw my laundry in the dryer? I didn't move. You can do it yourself, I said. She laughed, like I'd made a joke. Don't be dramatic. That phrase became her favorite. Don't be dramatic. Don't be a baby. Why are you acting like this? Every time I said no, she framed it as an overreaction. When the internet bill came in, she didn't even ask. She just said, did you pay the Wi-Fi yet? I said, not yet. Well, don't forget, she replied. I need it for work. I looked at her and said, we should probably split that now. Her face changed instantly. What do you mean? I mean, we're roommates. Roommates split utilities. She sighed loudly. You're really doing this? That sentence, you're really doing this, was telling. Doing what, exactly? Expecting fairness? Then came the rides. Before, I drove us everywhere. It was just assumed. If we went out with her friends, I drove. If she worked late, I picked her up. If she had errands, I was the transportation department. Now that we were broken up, I figured that would naturally stop. It didn't. One night, she walked into the living room already wearing her coat and said, we're leaving in 10 minutes. I didn't look up from my laptop. Who's we? She frowned. Me and you. We're meeting Jenna and the others. I'm not going, I said. She stared at me. What do you mean you're not going? I mean, I wasn't invited, I said, and I don't feel like it. There was a pause. Then, so how am I supposed to get there? I shrugged. However you want. She scoffed. You're unbelievable. Unbelievable, because I wouldn't drive her to dinner with her friends after she dumped me. That night, when she came home, she was cold. Quiet. Passive-aggressive. She slammed cabinets just loud enough to be noticed. The next day, she tried a different tactic. She was nicer, almost sweet. She asked how work was. She laughed at one of my jokes. She sat close to me on the couch, her leg pressed against mine, familiar territory. Then she said, I'm running low on money this month. Can you cover groceries until I get paid? I didn't answer immediately. Before, I would have said yes without thinking. I always did. It was easier than having a conversation. This time I said, no. Her head snapped toward me. What? No, I repeated. We should each cover our own expenses. She stared at me like I'd insulted her. That's really selfish, she said, after everything we've been through. There it was, the emotional leverage. After everything we've been through. As if history obligated me to fund the present. I replied, breaking up doesn't come with a subscription plan. She didn't like that. From that point on, the pattern became obvious. She still expected. Shared groceries, but paid by me. Access to my streaming accounts. Rides whenever it was convenient. Help with laundry and cleaning. Reminders about bills she didn't want to think about. Emotional availability when she was stressed. But she no longer felt obligated to. Check in with me. Consider my feelings. Offer affection or reassurance. Treat me like a partner. When I pushed back, she minimized it. Dude, you're making this weird. You're being petty. Why are you acting like a child? Once, when I told her I wouldn't clean up her dishes anymore, she laughed and said, come on, you're better at it. That sentence stuck with me. You're better at it. Translation, you should keep doing it. Another time, I canceled one of the streaming services I paid for. The next evening, she walked into the living room, remote in hand. Why isn't Hulu working? I canceled it, I said. She stared at the TV, then at me. Why would you do that? Because I'm not using it, I said. She crossed her arms. I use it? I nodded. Then you can subscribe. She shook her head. This is ridiculous. But it wasn't ridiculous, it was just new. What really drove it home was how she behaved in public. When we went out with her friends, because sometimes I still did, for my own reasons, she acted like nothing had changed. She laughed with me. She touched my arm. She made inside jokes. She leaned in close when other people were watching. Her friends still treated us like a couple. One of them even said, you two are so solid. She smiled and squeezed my thigh under the table. Later that night, back at the apartment, she walked past me without a word and locked herself in the bedroom. No affection, no conversation, no acknowledgement. That contrast was deliberate. In public, I was her boyfriend. In private, I was her roommate. Financially, I was her safety net. And the moment I started saying no, the tone changed. I wasn't nice anymore. I wasn't easygoing. I was cold. I was mean. I was overreacting. But here's the thing I kept coming back to. If simply removing my labor, money, and convenience made me the villain, then those were the only reasons I was valued in the first place. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me focused. Because once you see the pattern clearly, you stop arguing about feelings and start adjusting behavior. And that's when I knew the real conflict wasn't about the breakup. It was about entitlement. She felt entitled to the benefits of a relationship she had already ended. And I wasn't going to keep paying for something I was no longer part of. I didn't wake up one morning angry. I didn't slam doors, threaten anything, or make speeches about respect. What I did was quieter than that. I sat at the kitchen table one night, alone, after she went to bed. I opened my laptop, pulled up my banking app, and started looking at the numbers. Rent, utilities, subscriptions, groceries, gas, all the invisible costs I had been carrying without thinking. That's when it became clear to me. This wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about structure. A relationship is a system. When the relationship ends, the system has to change. If the system doesn't change, then the breakup is fake. And I wasn't going to live inside a fake breakup. So I made a decision. Not emotional, not dramatic, just principled. I wasn't going to punish her. I wasn't going to try to teach her a lesson. I wasn't going to be passive-aggressive. I was going to align my behavior with reality. And reality was simple. We were no longer a couple, which meant fairness, which meant boundaries, which meant consistency. The next morning, I waited until we were both awake and had coffee. I didn't want this to be a hallway argument or something shouted from another room. I said, we need to talk about how this is going to work. She sighed immediately, like she already knew it was coming and didn't want to hear it. I told you I don't want this to be a big thing, she said. I don't either, I replied. That's why I want to keep it simple. She sat down across from me, arms crossed, defensive posture. I spoke slowly, deliberately, like I was explaining a policy change at work. I'm not mad, I said. I'm not trying to get back at you, but we broke up. So the way we live together has to reflect that. She opened her mouth to interrupt me, but I held up my hand. Not aggressively, just enough to signal that I wasn't done. I'm setting some rules, I said, not to control you, to make this fair. That word, rules, again, she didn't like it, but I kept going. Rule 1, split expenses. This one's straightforward, I said. Rent, utilities, groceries, we split them. She frowned. We've never split rent. I know, I said. We were in a relationship, now we're not. She leaned back. So you want me to suddenly pay half of everything? Yes, I said. Or we adjust based on what each of us uses, but it won't be one-sided anymore. She shook her head. That's a lot to put on me all at once. I nodded. Then we can talk about timelines, but the direction doesn't change. That part was important. I wasn't negotiating whether things would change, only how and when. Utilities get split, I continued. Internet, electricity, water. Groceries are separate unless we agree otherwise. I'll take my name off anything you're using but not contributing to. She stared at the table, silent. Rule 2, services are over. This was the one she really didn't like. I'm not doing boyfriend stuff anymore, I said. No rides, no errands, no managing your schedule, no handling things for you. She laughed, sharp and humorless. Wow, you're really going all in, huh? I'm just being accurate, I said. I'm not your partner anymore, so I'm not your support system. That sounds cruel, she said. It's not, I replied. It's neutral. I explained it plainly. I won't be your chauffeur. If you need to go somewhere, you figure it out. I won't remind you about bills. I won't clean up after you. I won't pick things up on my way, unless it's mine. She rolled her eyes. So you're just going to ignore me now? No, I said. I'm going to treat you like a roommate. She didn't have a response to that. Rule 3, space and privacy. This part matters, I said. We need clear boundaries. I pointed to the hallway. My space is my space. Your space is your space. No going into each other's rooms without asking. She scoffed. We live together. And we're not together, I said. I continued. No touching that blurs lines, no flirting in public like nothing changed, no acting like a couple when it's convenient. That one hit a nerve. So now you're telling me how to behave? She snapped. No, I said calmly. I'm telling you how I will behave. And what I won't accept. I also brought up guests. If we're having people over, we communicate. No surprises. No using the apartment as a stage to send mixed signals. She shook her head slowly. You're being extreme. I looked at her and said something I had rehearsed in my head the night before. I'm not being extreme. I'm being consistent. That was my line. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften it either. You ended the relationship, I continued. I'm respecting that. But respect goes both ways. There was a long silence after that. Finally, she said, this feels like you're trying to make things uncomfortable, so I'll leave. I thought about it for a second, then answered honestly. No, I said. I'm making things honest. If that's uncomfortable, that's not my fault. She didn't yell, she didn't cry, she just looked unsettled. Because for the first time since the breakup, she was facing the actual cost of her decision. I stood up and said, if you want to talk about details, we can, but the principles aren't changing. Before I walked away, I added one last thing. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because pretending nothing changed is worse. That was the moment the dynamic shifted. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel victorious. I felt aligned. And from that point on, every interaction was going to test whether she really wanted to be just roommates or whether she'd been counting on me to stay her boyfriend without the title. What surprised me the most wasn't her anger. It was how fast she assumed I was bluffing. I think, in her mind, my rules were just words. Something I said in the moment that would fade once things went back to normal. She was used to me adapting, smoothing things over, taking on inconvenience so life stayed easy. So instead of arguing, I let the changes speak. I treated the next 2 weeks like a controlled experiment, one action at a time. No lectures. No emotional speeches. Just consistency. Day 1, groceries. On Monday evening, I stopped by the store on my way home. I bought exactly what I needed, nothing more. When I got back, I unpacked the bags and put everything away on one side of the fridge and pantry. I didn't hide it. I didn't label it aggressively. I just made a clear physical separation. She walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and paused. "Why is everything on one side?" she asked. "Because that's my food," I said. She laughed. "Are you serious?" "Yes." She shook her head. "You're really going to do this?" I met her eyes. "We're roommates, so we buy our own groceries." She scoffed. "This is so petty." I didn't argue. I went back to what I was doing. That night, she ordered takeout, for herself only. She made sure I noticed. Day 2, streaming services. The next morning, I changed the passwords on the streaming accounts I paid for: Netflix, Spotify, one or two others. Not out of spite, out of alignment. That evening, she came into the living room holding the remote. "Netflix isn't working," she said. "I know." She stared at the screen. "Did you mess with it?" "I updated my account," I replied. She turned to me. "So what? I'm just not allowed to watch TV now?" "You can," I said, "with your own subscription." Her voice sharpened. "You're being ridiculous." I repeated, calmly, "We're roommates, so we pay for our own stuff." She stormed off into her room and slammed the door hard enough to make the walls shake. I didn't follow her. Day 3, laundry. By Wednesday, she had shifted from disbelief to irritation. That afternoon, she left a basket of clothes outside the laundry room, a familiar move. Before, that basket would magically end up clean and folded. This time, it stayed there. When she got home and saw it untouched, she said, "You couldn't just throw it in." I didn't look up from my laptop. "No." "Why not?" "Because it's not my laundry." She crossed her arms. "You know I've been busy." I nodded. "Then you'll have to make time." She rolled her eyes. "You're acting like a child." I replied evenly, "We're roommates. Everyone does their own laundry." She muttered something under her breath and dragged the basket herself. Late. Day 4, rides. Thursday night, she walked into the apartment already dressed to go out. "Hey," she said casually, "can you drive me to Maya's place?" I closed my laptop. "No." She froze. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I'm not driving you." Her tone shifted instantly. "Are you serious right now?" "Yes." She laughed, incredulous. "It's on your way." "That doesn't matter," I said. "So what am I supposed to do?" she snapped. "However you want," I replied. "Uber, bus, ask someone else." She stared at me like I'd betrayed her. "This is unbelievable," she said, "after everything I've done for you." I didn't engage with that revision of history. "We're roommates," I said. "I'm not your driver." She left without saying goodbye and didn't come home until late. Day 5, cleaning. Friday morning, I cleaned my bathroom, my area of the kitchen, my dishes. I didn't touch hers. By evening, she noticed. "So you're just going to leave that mess?" she asked, gesturing toward her side of the sink. "Yes," I said. She scoffed. "You're seriously going to live like this?" "I'm living like a roommate," I replied. She threw her hands up. "This is insane." But she still cleaned it herself. Day 6, utilities. On Saturday, I created a simple shared spreadsheet: rent, internet, electricity, water, split down the middle. I sent it to her with a message: "Here's the breakdown. Let me know if you want to adjust anything." She didn't reply for hours. When she finally did, it wasn't about numbers. "This feels cold," she wrote. I replied with one sentence: "It's fair." That was all. Day 7, public behavior. Sunday evening, we went to a small gathering with her friends. I went because I wanted to observe something. She sat close to me. She laughed loudly at my jokes. She touched my arm. At one point, she leaned in and whispered something playful, like we were still together. I gently moved her hand away. She looked at me, shocked. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Setting boundaries," I whispered back. Her smile faded for the rest of the night. On the way home, she said, "You embarrassed me." I replied, "I'm not pretending anymore." That's when the emotional tactics started. She accused me of being bitter. She said I was punishing her for being honest. She told me I was making the apartment hostile. Once, she said, "If you still cared about me at all, you wouldn't do this." I answered the same way every time. We're roommates. No anger, no sarcasm, no explanation, just repetition. By the second week, the tone shifted again. She stopped asking for favors. She stopped leaving things around for me to handle. She stopped assuming access. Not because she agreed with me, but because she realized I wasn't backing down. One evening, she looked at the fridge, at the clear division of food, and sighed. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with this," she said. I replied, "I said I would." That was the moment I knew the escalation had worked. Not because she was happy, not because I won, but because the system had finally changed. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't threatened. I hadn't tried to control her. I had just stopped providing benefits that no longer made sense. And once the benefits disappeared, the reality of being just roommates started to feel very different to her. Once she realized the practical pressure wasn't going away, she switched strategies. She stopped trying to negotiate directly with me and started outsourcing the conflict. At first, it was subtle. I'd walk into a room and she'd suddenly end a phone call. I'd hear my name mentioned from behind a closed door, followed by a lowered voice. She'd leave the apartment more often, stay out longer, come back already annoyed. Then the labels started showing up. One evening, as I was making dinner, my dinner, she walked past me and said, almost casually, "You know, my friends think you're being really cheap." I didn't look up. "Okay." She paused, clearly expecting more. "That's it?" "That's it," I said. She frowned. "They think you're punishing me." I finally turned around and met her eyes. "I'm not punishing you. I'm normalizing the situation." She scoffed. "That's the same thing." "No," I said. "It just feels the same because you were used to things being easier." She didn't respond. She just walked away, shaking her head. The next day, it escalated. I got a text from her friend Jenna, the same one who used to joke about stealing me if we ever broke up. "Hey, can we talk? I'm a little concerned." I stared at the message for a moment before replying. "Sure, what's up?" She called me immediately. Her tone was careful, rehearsed. "I don't want to get in the middle of anything," she said, which is always how conversations start when someone is absolutely getting in the middle of something. "She's really struggling," Jenna continued, "and honestly, the way you're acting is making it worse." I didn't interrupt her. I let her finish. Then I said, calmly, "We broke up." "I know," she said, "but still." "And we're living together temporarily," I added. "So I stopped paying for things that aren't mine and stopped doing boyfriend stuff." There was a pause on the line. "That's it?" she asked. "That's it," I said. Another pause. "She said you cut her off," Jenna said. "I didn't cut her off," I replied. "I stopped subsidizing her." The line went quiet. Finally, Jenna said, "Okay, I just wanted to understand." "You do now," I said. "I'm not angry. I'm just done pretending." We hung up less than 2 minutes later. That was my 15 seconds of explanation. I didn't repeat it. I didn't expand on it. But apparently that wasn't enough. A few days later, I ran into our downstairs neighbor in the lobby. A guy in his 40s, friendly, the kind of person who chats about nothing. This time, he looked awkward. "Hey man," he said, "everything okay upstairs?" "Yeah," I replied. "Why?" He hesitated. "Your roommate mentioned things were tense." I smiled politely. "We broke up. We're just adjusting." He nodded slowly. Got it." That was it. Conversation over. No drama. No defense. No counterattack. But she wasn't done yet. That weekend, I got a call from her sister. I hadn't spoken to her sister one-on-one in years. "Hi," she said, skipping pleasantries. "I just want to understand what's going on." I could hear judgment already baked into her tone. "She says you're making things really hard for her," her sister continued, "like you're trying to force her out." I took a breath, not because I was angry, but because I wanted to be precise. "We broke up," I said. "I'm not forcing anything. I just stopped acting like her boyfriend." "That sounds a little harsh," she replied. "It sounds harsh because you're hearing it secondhand," I said. In practice, it's just separate groceries and bills. Silence. So you're not kicking her out? She asked. No, I said. You're not threatening her? No. You're not yelling or insulting her? No. Another pause. Then she said, okay, I just wanted to check. We ended the call shortly after. Later that night, my ex confronted me in the kitchen. Why are you talking to everyone about this? She demanded. I'm not, I said. Yes, you are, she snapped. My sister, my friends. They contacted me, I replied. I answered honestly. She folded her arms. You made me look bad. I looked at her for a long moment before speaking. I didn't say anything bad about you, I said. I just explained what's happening. That's the same thing, she said. No, I replied. It just feels that way because the story doesn't hold up. She accused me of being manipulative, of playing the calm victim, of trying to win people over. I didn't rise to any of it. I explained it once, I said. I'm not doing it again. She stared at me, frustrated. So you don't care what people think? She asked. I care about what's true, I replied. That answer ended the conversation. From that point on, the social pressure didn't disappear, but it lost its power. Because once people heard the actual situation, stripped of emotion and exaggeration, there wasn't much to argue with. We broke up. We lived together temporarily. We split things fairly. That's not punishment. That's not cruelty. That's just reality. And the more she tried to frame it as something else, the clearer it became to everyone involved that the problem wasn't my behavior. It was the fact that the free ride had ended. Once the social pressure failed, she escalated again. This time, it wasn't subtle. It wasn't passive-aggressive comments or eye rolls. It was pressure designed to make me panic, fold, or feel guilty enough to reverse course. It started with threats. One night, out of nowhere, she said maybe I should just move out. The way she said it mattered. It wasn't a plan, it wasn't calm, it was a test. I looked up from my phone. Okay. She blinked. Okay? If that's what you want to do, I said, we can talk about timing. She stared at me, clearly thrown off. Ha! I didn't say now, she snapped. I just mean if this is how you're going to act. I nodded. Then it's probably better long term. She waited for me to backpedal. I didn't. That was the first time I realized something important. She didn't actually want to leave. She wanted the threat of leaving to scare me. When it didn't work, she switched tactics. A week later, she stopped paying for her share of groceries entirely. No announcement, no discussion. She just didn't contribute. At first, I thought it was an oversight. Then, I noticed she was still eating, just not buying. One evening, I opened the fridge and saw my food noticeably lower than it should have been. I checked the pantry, same thing. I didn't confront her immediately. I waited. The next day, I moved my food into my room. I bought a small fridge lockbox and put dry goods in sealed containers. That night, she noticed. What is wrong with you? She demanded. Are you hiding food now? I met her gaze. You stopped paying. She scoffed. I've just been tight this week. Then we should talk about that, I said. But eating food you didn't pay for isn't a solution. She threw her hands up. Unbelievable. I can't believe you're treating me like this. I didn't argue. I opened my laptop and sent a message. Written, clear, unemotional. Talks going forward, all shared expenses will be documented. If something isn't paid, it won't be shared. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't justify myself. I documented. That's when the victim narrative really kicked in. She started sighing loudly whenever I entered a room. She started crying on phone calls, just loud enough for me to hear. She told people she felt unsafe in the apartment, even though nothing about my behavior had changed except the removal of free services. One night, she confronted me with tears in her eyes. I feel like I'm being pushed out, she said, like you're trying to make me miserable so I'll leave. I didn't react emotionally. I asked a practical question instead. Do you want to leave? She hesitated. I don't know. Okay, I said. Then we need a plan. That word again. Times A, plan. Ten ain. Motion no. She hated that word because plans remove leverage. I continued. This can't be indefinite. We need a timeline. She crossed her arms. So now you're giving me deadlines? I'm asking for clarity, I replied. For both of us. She accused me of being controlling, of acting like her landlord, of being heartless. I didn't respond to any of that. The next morning, I sent her a message in writing. We should agree on a move-out date or revisit the lease together. This situation isn't sustainable long term. She didn't reply. 2 days later, the utilities bill came due. I paid my half and sent her a screenshot with the amount she owed. She ignored it. That's when I escalated. Not emotionally, but structurally. I contacted the landlord. Not to complain, not to threaten, just to clarify options. I asked about lease adjustments, subletting rules, and notice periods. I took notes. I saved emails. That same evening, I informed her, calmly. I spoke to the landlord. I said, there are a few options if one of us wants to leave. We should talk about which one makes sense. Her face changed. You went behind my back? She snapped. No, I said. I prepared. She accused me of plotting, of trying to trap her. I responded with facts. No one is being forced. But we can't keep living in limbo. That night, she tried provocation. She brought someone over without telling me. Loud laughter. Doors closing. Music turned up just enough to be disruptive. I didn't confront her. I didn't react. The next morning, I sent one message. Please let me know in advance if you're having guests. That was part of our agreement. She replied immediately. Wow, you're unbelievable. I didn't respond. Silence is a form of clarity. Over the next few days, the pattern repeated. She would hint at leaving but make no plans. Skip payments and hope I'd cover. Cry to others. Provoke me into reacting. And every time, I did the same thing. I documented. I communicated once, in writing. I proposed practical solutions. No debates. No defending my character. No emotional explanations. Eventually, something shifted. One evening, she sat down across from me at the table. Okay, she said quietly. Let's talk about dates. That was the moment the power dynamic finally broke. Not because I was cruel. Not because I pushed her out. But because manipulation doesn't work on someone who refuses to engage emotionally and insists on structure. At that point, it was clear. She could no longer float indefinitely on comfort, guilt, or chaos. Reality had entered the room. And reality doesn't respond to threats. The turning point didn't come during a fight. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, no final argument where everything spilled out. It came on a quiet evening, in a moment so small that she almost missed it. I was sitting at the kitchen table working on my laptop. She came in a little later than usual, dropped her bag by the door, and went straight to the fridge. I watched her from the corner of my eye without saying anything. She opened the fridge and just stood there, not for a second or two, long enough that it became obvious something was wrong. The fridge was clean, organized, and clearly divided. My side had food. Her side was mostly empty. A half-used bottle of dressing. A few leftovers. Nothing substantial. She closed the fridge slowly and opened it again, like maybe she'd imagined it. Then she sighed. I guess I need to go to the store, she said, mostly to herself. I didn't respond. That silence was new. Before, silence from me usually meant tension. This time, it meant detachment. She turned around. You're not going to offer? I looked up. Offer what? To come with me, she said. Or pick stuff up. I shook my head once. No. No explanation, no tone, just a fact. She stared at me for a moment, clearly waiting for the follow-up. The but, the unless, the fine, I'll do it this time. None came. She grabbed her keys and left. When she came back 40 minutes later, she was carrying bags in both hands. She dropped them on the counter harder than necessary. This is exhausting, she said. I closed my laptop and finally looked at her fully. What is? I asked. All of it, she said, gesturing around the apartment. This, living like strangers. I nodded. That's what breaking up feels like. She opened one of the bags and started putting things away, on her side. She noticed how little space she had left. This apartment was never meant for two separate lives, she muttered. I said something I'd been thinking for weeks. Neither was our relationship. She didn't respond. A few days later, there was another moment, smaller but sharper. She was running late for work and couldn't find her charger. She looked through the living room, then came into my room without knocking. Have you seen my charger? I looked at her from my desk. Please don't come in here without asking. She froze. I just need it for 2 seconds. I don't have it, I said, and this is my space. She exhaled sharply. You're really serious about this, aren't you? Yes, I said. That was the word I kept coming back to. Serious. Not angry, not bitter, not vengeful, just serious. The next symbolic moment came a few nights later. She asked me for a favor. Nothing huge, something I would have done automatically before. "Can you swing by the pharmacy on your way home tomorrow?" she asked. "I'm sick and I won't have time." I thought about it, not because I was tempted, but because I wanted to be sure of my answer. "No," I said. She frowned. "I'm not asking for much." "I know," I replied, "but I'm still not doing it." Her voice softened. "So you don't care at all?" I looked at her carefully before answering. "I care about myself enough not to blur lines anymore." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. That night, she didn't get angry. She didn't accuse me of being cruel. She looked tired. That was when I understood something important inside myself. For weeks, I'd been choosing discomfort over peace, awkwardness over convenience, silence over smoothness. And it had been worth it, because the peace I'd been maintaining before wasn't real peace. It was just me absorbing tension so she wouldn't have to. This was different. This was respect. Not from her, at least not yet. From me. I realized that I'd spent years prioritizing quiet over fairness, over clarity, over self-respect. And once I stopped doing that, everything shifted. She couldn't coast anymore. She couldn't lean. She couldn't pretend. Without the benefits, the arrangement stopped working for her. And that's when she finally started to understand what I'd understood all along. The relationship hadn't ended when she said the words. It ended when the system stopped supporting her. And I was okay with that. In the end, it didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic announcement, no suitcase slammed shut in anger, no final argument where everything was said and nothing was resolved. What happened instead was quieter and somehow more final. After the turning point, something in her shifted, not emotionally, but behaviorally. She stopped testing boundaries, stopped asking for favors, stopped assuming access. But she also stopped settling in. She began spending more nights out. She took phone calls in the hallway. She started dressing like she was going somewhere important, even on random weeknights. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't ask who she was seeing. I didn't need to. A week later, she said it. "I might have a place to stay," she said, standing in the kitchen, arms folded tightly across her chest. I looked up. "Okay." "With a friend," she added quickly, "just temporarily." I nodded. "That makes sense." She seemed irritated by my lack of reaction. "You're not even going to ask who?" she said. "No," I replied. "It doesn't matter." That was the truth. Over the next few days, boxes appeared, slowly at first. Then, more decisively. She packed in stages, like she was still unsure whether she was actually leaving or just proving that she could. Each time she taped up a box, she paused, waiting for something. A reaction? Regret. A plea. None came. The night before she moved out, she sat across from me at the table. "You really don't care," she said. I thought about that carefully. "I care," I said, "just not in the way you want me to." She looked at me, confused. "I care enough not to lie to myself anymore." She laughed bitterly. "So that's it? 3 years, and you're just fine?" I shook my head. "I'm not fine, I'm just not negotiating my self-respect." That ended the conversation. The next morning, she moved out while I was at work. When I came home, the apartment felt different. Not empty, lighter. Her room was bare. The bathroom shelf was clear. Her side of the fridge was completely empty now. No note, no message, just absence. A few days later, she texted me. "I didn't think you'd actually let me go like that." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "I didn't let you go," I wrote. "You left." She didn't respond. And that was the end of it. Not dramatic, not cruel, just real. What I learned from all of this wasn't complicated, and it wasn't something I'd read in a book or heard on a podcast. It was simple. When you remove unearned benefits, people show you whether they wanted you or what you provided. I didn't punish her. I didn't manipulate her. I didn't try to win. I aligned my actions with reality. And reality doesn't care about comfort, it cares about consistency. That's not cruelty. That's just how things work. I didn't come out of this feeling victorious. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. What I felt was grounded. Looking back, there are a few lessons that stuck with me, simple ones, but hard-earned. I don't dress them up because they don't need it. First, boundaries are a form of self-respect. For a long time, I thought boundaries were something you set against other people. In reality, they're something you set for yourself. The moment I stopped crossing my own lines just to keep things smooth, my life got clearer. Not easier, but clearer. Second, words matter far less than behavior. She said she cared. She said she needed time. She said she didn't want things to change. None of that mattered. What mattered was what she expected me to continue doing after the relationship ended. Behavior always tells the truth. Listen to that. Third, fairness beats habit. We had habits that worked when we were together. Once we weren't, those habits became obligations, unequal ones. Just because something has always been that way doesn't mean it should stay that way. Equity isn't cold, it's honest. Fourth, if everything falls apart when you stop giving, it wasn't love. This one was uncomfortable to accept, but it's real. When support, money, effort, and convenience are removed, and the connection disappears with them, then what you had wasn't mutual. It was transactional, and you were paying the higher price. Fifth, leaving clean is worth more than revenge. I could have escalated, I could have humiliated her, I could have tried to win socially. None of that would have made my life better. Walking away without drama, without insults, without regret, that's a win you don't have to explain to anyone. I didn't harden myself. I didn't become bitter. I became more precise about what I accept. And that changed everything. So here's where I leave it. She wanted to break up, but keep the benefits. I said no, and adjusted my behavior to match reality. I didn't yell. I didn't punish. I didn't pretend. I just stopped paying for a relationship that no longer existed. So I'll ask you the same question I asked myself. Was I wrong for setting boundaries and sticking to them? What would you have done in my place? If you want more real stories like this, no filters, no fantasies, hit like and subscribe. There are plenty of updates still coming.